Yo, what's up, you guys? It's your girl, Trudy LPC, back for a new episode of the Self-Aware and NFL podcast. I have a guest with me today who is going to share their personal and professional story. And it is something that it is hard for a lot of women to kind of talk about. So I just want to put a trigger warning out there for anyone who has experienced childlessness, not by choice, or anyone that may be trying to conceive right now. You know, this is an episode that really is really close to my heart. As well. So I just wanted to put that out there before we get started. I have with me Carrie Brauninger. She is a transition life coach and a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Colorado. She is the owner of the Other Path Therapy and Coaching, and also has an organization called Sonder Sisterhood that helps women who have experienced childlessness not by choice. So without further ado, please welcome to the Self-Aware NFL podcast, Miss Carrie Brauninger. Hey, Carrie, how are you doing? How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you taking time out of your journey, out of your day, just to kind of share part of your journey with us. I want to give you the opportunity to kind of tell a little bit about yourself. I know I spoke about it a little bit in your intro, but you know, you speak I read a little bit about your story, so I just want you to be able to share that with the audience.
Yeah, thank you. So my name's Carrie. I work as my background is in social work, and kind of my day job is I'm a therapist in a primary care doctor's office. And then I also work with women who are childless, not by choice, like you mentioned. And I work with them through a practice and then also an online group, as you mentioned, really to help bring together women who are childless, not by choice, so they can have understanding and feeling that they're not alone, that there are other people like them out there, even though it absolutely doesn't feel like it. You know, I think I went through, it's very brutal grieving, not being able to have children or not having children when you wanted them. I think it's difficult if you did want them and you don't have them, just with all the kind of societal pressures and things like that. And wanting them and not being able to brings a little bit of an added layer. And it's not something that's talked about. It's not something that people typically know how to support somebody around. Yeah. And we can get into kind of my thoughts on that as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it can feel very isolating, very lonely. You know, it's one of those things where you're not going to have something that you want. And you're also watching other people live this life that you, during certain parts of the grief process, you wish that you had. It impacts family. It impacts friendships. It impacts work. It impacts spiritualness or religiousness, if you're in that community. It impacts so many different parts of our life. And a lot of us were kind of invisible. And so I want people to know they're not.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is something I agree that people don't talk about enough. I have a very close friend of mine who is kind of dealing with possible infertility right now, going through IVF and kind of starting that process up. And, you know, it's challenging. So I definitely hope to be able to learn some things as we talk about how to best support her in her journey, because it's difficult having some of those conversations, you know, with her. I am not a mother. And I, you know, again, we could talk a little bit about my journey as we talk more, but, you know, that, you know, really when I saw you kind of, you know, put out the interest in coming on the show, was like, this needs to be talked about more. It does need to be talked about more. And so, you know, like, as I said, I have a friend who is kind of experiencing some challenges around that. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about some of the challenges you kind of faced towards your journey?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Feel free to ask me anything.
Yeah.
So currently I'm childless by circumstance. And essentially what that means is I kind of aged out. So to my knowledge, I don't have any infertility problems. And I didn't want to have a child by myself. I completely appreciate that people do. I honor, love, and respect people who do want to do that. It just it didn't feel like the right choice for me. So and when you start to sort of slowly glide into the descent of aging out, it's a long process. There's a lot of shame, embarrassment, sort of like questioning what other people are thinking about you and what that means to be a woman and not be a mother, let alone a woman and not be a partner in marriage. And it sucked. It was really hard. It was brutal. Now, cut to, I'm 44 now, and I've really, I think, sort of, not that there's not grief is a part of journey whenever there's a loss around anything. But in terms of being able to, I think, really think forward, move forward, feel really excited about my life, that's probably more in the last 2 years that I've been able to do that through like my own work with a therapist.
Okay.
Now, cut to, I'm having a hysterectomy next month. So,
wow.
This is just apparently supposed to be my life.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that is a lot to reconcile, and I'm glad you did, kind of share like part of your journey has been speaking with a therapist to kind of work through that, but then coming up on this event in a couple of months, like that's obviously going to take a lot more work to kind of go through, and I know a lot of women have to make choices around, whether they have a hysterectomy. I know like some people who are a lot younger than you have sometimes had to make that decision. And I know doctors are really funny about, about that just in general, but your journey, it seems like, it has been something that you've used to kind of help other women who may have different circumstances, but are also kind of dealing with, I guess, the stigma, the guilt and shame around not being able to reproduce in that way. How do you help women who, may be in a different circumstance, but are also kind of dealing with some of those challenges?
Yeah, good question. So I think, community, I think, is healing, right? Community is healing. So I think really helping women access different resources, access different communities, access different groups where, listen, if you have feelings that you need to say and the people around you, while they love and support you, may fumble or not say something that lands the right way, here's this other group you can go to who, can see you, understand you, and validate your experience. I also think being able to be, we talk a lot about representation in our culture, right? And there is no representation in my perspective in some cultures of women who are childless, not by choice, and living a great life. They're the spinster, they're the cat lady, they're, the woman who comes home for the holidays and has to like pretend she's with somebody, or, she's hunting for the lumberjack that happens to stumble into the coffee shop. It's just, and then everything that like happy and ever after is like being partnered and going on and living a happy life. Right. So there's a whole lot of us who that's not the life that we're living. And we need to see a life. We need to see us living a fun life, a meaningful life, a purposeful life, and that children and partnerhood aren't the only things that do that. So I think sort of framing the experience in that way, like, hey, this is awful in its grief. And there's an element of this that tells you you can't live a good life. That's total BS.
Right.
It's complete BS. And I don't blame you for feeling it because I know you're not seeing it. So we do some work around that, self-concept, self-image. And then a disenfranchised grief, right? This is a grief that is a non-event. It's something thing not happening versus happening. And we live in a society, right, where, some people are better than others, but there's sort of a framework, there's sort of a path for if somebody passes away or there's grief related to that.
Right.
We get someone a card, we say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." We bring over food. There's tradition and recognition around the loss. This, if you're going through fertility treatment that doesn't happen, there may be a little bit, maybe. If it's, by circumstance, people may not even have any idea you're going through it.
Yeah.
And so it's giving a space to be able to talk about this within the framework of grief. And then let alone all the ridiculous things people say to you.
Exactly. Yeah. That part is a little bit tricky. I love that what you do focuses on kind of reframing the self-image, because a lot of how women see themselves is through the framework of being a mother, a wife, and that's what you're raised up to do. And when you're outside of that, that standard, then you're kind of seen as, what's wrong with you, versus being, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm perfectly fine. It's just that life hasn't worked out the way that I guess it does in the movies. But I love the reframing piece of it, because I think so many women need to hear, that this is something that is okay to grieve about. This is something that is difficult to go through, because a lot of women their feelings aren't validated enough when it comes to things like this. And so I think that piece of it is really, really important. Now, speaking about how we talk to people about, infertility, or if they're childless, not by choice, like, what are some suggestions in terms of ways that we can do a better job of supporting our friends or family members that may be experiencing something like this?
Yeah. So the thing that I usually start off with is by saying, don't feel like you have to rescue. Don't feel like you have to problem solve. When somebody says, "Oh, I'm childless, not by choice," or "Do you have children?" Right? This is the way I talk about it. We all ask each other, "Do you have kids?" We can all have certain feelings about whether or not we should even be asking people that.
Should we be?
I do.
Is it okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a personal thing. I think it's a get to know you question.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody intends to be intrusive around it. However, it is still an annoying question. It's like asking somebody, what's your job? Well, what's that have to do with sort of who I am as a person a lot of times, right? And I think people ask that question in order to sort of, especially women, in order to get to know somebody, bond over something. Now we can have this shared experience that we can sort of talk about or make small talk around. What I tell people is, if you're going to ask that question, you need to prepare yourself for the answer to be something other than what you're expecting.
Right.
And so what I find is this is exactly when people start to blurt out stuff, because now they're caught off guard. Right. So, "Oh, do you have children?" "No." "Didn't you want them?" Or "Why not?" Or, "Oh, I think for a lot of women who go through infertility treatments, "Oh, just stop trying. When you stop trying," or "Everyone has this aunt," or "Everybody has this person who had this miracle baby," right? When in reality, nobody's soliciting advice in that way. And it can feel intrusive, and it can also feel like somebody's trying to fix you.
Yeah.
So be prepared for the answer to be no, and have a response that is the same way as if somebody said yes. "Oh, can you tell me something? Oh, what do you like to do?" Or maybe you don't even ask the question. Maybe you just say, "Can you tell me what you like to do for fun?" Or, "Have you been anywhere fun lately?" You don't even get into people's sort of deeply personal things.
Right.
That's probably the route I go. That is the route I go. If you happen to go the other route, watch yourself.
Yeah.
because you never know what's going to come. You could ask somebody, do you have children? And they may say yes, and they passed away, right? Like there are other things that you have to be prepared for. Nobody wants to hear about your aunt and how they had a baby. Like nobody. Like, so stop. Like, don't problem solve for anybody.
Yeah.
Validate and go on. I would be very careful about pitying somebody as well. I know sometimes when I say no, I can feel the air get sucked out of the room. And I'm like, well, here we go. And earlier on, I would try and rescue somebody from that. Oh, it's okay. Oh, tell me about your kids. Because I would be feeling uncomfortable and less confident and feeling like, oh, I've just done something to make this uncomfortable based on my answer when it has nothing to do with me.
Right. They need to sit with that silence, not you.
They need to sit. Exactly. That's the therapist in us, right?
Yes.
Like, we're going to go ahead and just sit in this silence.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Right. Right. So kind of all that to say, don't be intrusive. Don't try and solve the situation for somebody. Just have a conversation and ask them about other things about themselves too. Now, if you have a friend who's in grief, I think validating and acknowledging and letting them know you love them and support them in the same way that you would with any other grief.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's definitely very helpful. And I think that, people being able to hear that it is kind of intrusive. It is personal. Yeah. And I know that people use it to break the ice. And it's so crazy as someone who's not a mother. That's never a question I would lead with. I probably would be like, oh yeah, where have you traveled lately? Or maybe what you do for a career. But like, I don't know. And maybe that's because I'm not a mother. I don't lead with that. But it's just kind of interesting because that would never be a question I would ask. Unless in therapy, obviously I want to know, got kids running around, but totally different environment. So yeah, I really, I think that people need to be aware of those kind of how uncomfortable it can make the person who is not a mother feel in those situations. So in terms of like other women who may, be dealing with, I guess a family member, like, and how would you recommend them talking to a family member about something that they're going through around possible infertility, especially if like they're considering adoption or other, ways of being able to become a mother?
Yeah. So first and foremost, if you have this type of relationship with a person, I would ask them, hey, I want to be a support for you. And I'm not sure what you might find the most supportive. And so what can I say? Is there anything I can do that would help you feel supported by me? Because that's my goal. That's my mission. I think it's always good to keep in the back of your head too, that like, it's not your business if they want to adopt or they don't want to adopt, or they want to freeze their eggs or not freeze their eggs, or go through another round of infertility, or if they want to stop infertility.
Yeah.
And supporting somebody unconditionally, right? You don't get an opinion unless they ask for it. If they ask for it, then you can give it. Or if you ask for consent and they say yes. But this isn't your business.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think, sometimes people can be kind of intrusive and they can say things and, like even, I'm thinking about my personal situation of, like if I were to go through the process, I would have to get a donor in terms of like a sperm donor or whatever.
Yep.
And, some people may need to have an egg donated and that can even if they get an egg donated and they carry the egg, you have some family members who may look at it as if, oh, well, that's not my biological child because it's not your egg. Though there's just so many things I guess around this topic. Have you ever encountered any of that in working with people?
Not in terms of making the choice, to do a donor egg or a sperm donor or adopt. Just I generally work with people who have decided I'm not doing that. But most people go through that thinking process, whether they sit there in that thought process for 5 minutes or they sit in that thought process for a year. And religious expectations, family expectations, cultural expectations all play a role in what somebody is thinking around that. And I think if you have a family member that you're like, I don't know if this is the right path for them, I would support them and listen to them. And again, ultimately, this is your decision. It's kind of like when you say it, it kind of reminds me of like if somebody gets pregnant, but the father is somebody where they're like, that's probably not going to be the best choice. You suck it up and you support it.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, right. It is more than when someone's making a decision around that, whether to adopt or not adopt or surrogate or things like that. Keep in mind, this is all in the framework of, I want to have a baby. Does it mean that I'm the mother if it's not my egg? Does it mean it's all within this framework of all these stereotypes around what is a mother, what is a woman? And sometimes I think it's also related to, well, I don't know what my purpose is if I'm not a mom. Right. Meandering a little bit. But I think it all goes back to how people see themselves and what that is.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, I think that going back to the self-image is still always going to be at the core of it. How do I see myself if I'm not this? How do I see myself if this doesn't happen? If the IVF doesn't work, then am I okay? What does that mean for my life? So yeah, I think it's really important for women to have those conversations with themselves. Obviously working with someone like yourself or working with, a therapist to kind of work through those things to really be able to process that. Because it's kind of almost like you're having to reshape or reinvent your story almost.
Oh, yeah. And completely reinvent what you potentially had imagined for your future. When we think about how early most girls start thinking about being a mom, it's pretty early in life, like 2. I mean, it is early days, right? In terms of dolls and things like that. And so and for many people who are childless, not by choice, we're not always in a situation where it occurs to us that we wouldn't be able to have children if we wanted them.
Right.
And so we are typically not spending a whole lot of time around the what if this doesn't happen. I think we start to as we get older, right, and if it hasn't happened yet. But, when you're growing up, when you're in your 20s, most people are not thinking, oh, I may not be able to have kids. I might have a health issue. I might just have unexplained infertility. I might not meet the right person. I might go through something really traumatic that then delays everything. And so when it happens, it's almost like, well, now what?
Yeah.
What does this mean?
It can be a lot. As you were talking, I was kind of thinking of like throughout my life, I plan to have kids by 30. Oh, I plan to have kids around 35. And then I remember very vividly, 2020, that was going to be the year. And then the whole world kind of just I was like, okay, yeah, probably not the time to have a kid when no one can come, even to the hospital to be there, so it's kind of like, we all have these plans. I had plans, and now, I'm 40 now, and I'm like, yeah, I think it's too late, or whatever. But I think that desire is still there.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting you said 40. I would say for 40, that was when I turned 40, that's when I felt like I was going off a cliff. right? There's something that, for me at least, turning 40, I was like, oh shit, the universe is really going to do me this way.
Right.
Okay. What are we going to do now? And then the people around you, just oftentimes when you're 40, not everybody, your friends have children. So not only is there maybe a lack of being able to really understand, but sometimes friendships start to slip away or slip apart just because of schedules become different, right? And people have got to start hustling the kids everywhere, or they're tired, or not that women who don't have children aren't tired too, but things change. It impacts relationship when you start moving through different seasons of life than somebody else. I think for those of us who are high achieving women, it can feel like a failure. And then people start to make judgments around, is that why you don't have kids? Because you prioritized people just think they know things that they don't, because it's, for a lot of people, and it's inexplicable that you would not have kids if you want them.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time.
It does. It's so funny. You're talking about the changes in life. And so it's so crazy because I have two best friends. One of them has two kids, and then one of them, we're both 40 now or whatever, and neither of us have kids. And so it's kind of we've watched her, the one that has kids, we've watched her kids grow up, and actually her son recently just graduated from high school. And so it's kind of now we are going through, her daughter going through high school. So it's kind of we watch these kids grow up, and it's well, if I did decide to have kids now, if there was an act of God and it just kind of, happened, it's now I'm going to be 45 with a kindergartner. It's do I really want to do that?
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring, it's so interesting that you bring this up, because, I use the phrase childless, not by choice. And, using the word childless sort of implies lacking, something missing. And for a very long time, I absolutely related to that part of it. Doesn't mean that I felt like I was less than. I think it just spoke to the grief of it. And there's a part of me at 44 now. And there are days where I have grief around not having kids, or I wish I had kids, particularly when I see my dog around little kids and how cute that is and things like that. And then I'm also I hear stories from my friends who love being parents. They love it. They have great kids. And the crap that they're having to deal with or explain, or, I was in a hurry and I was tired, and I was walking in the store, and there was this little kid that just kept asking his mom all these questions. And I was I would not be in the mood for that right now. Right. Or I can't imagine having sleepless nights at my age right now. Right. So all that to say is, I sometimes think, am I child free? Not by choice. Not that we have to label anything. Ultimately, I'm just a woman without kids. But I do think it highlights for women who are in the thick of it right now, in that deep thick of it, it gets better.
Yeah.
It won't feel as acutely painful. It will ache, but you won't feel like there's a nail in your eye every second of your life.
Wow. Yeah. I'm glad to know that it gets better. Thank you for that.
It does. It does. It doesn't mean that it doesn't still hurt. Sometimes it doesn't mean that it's not all of those things. Remember, this is a loss.
Right. Yeah.
But you will start to be able to imagine your life in a way that excites you, and not about what you don't have, but about what you can have.
Wow. Okay. Well, I definitely appreciate that. And I know the listeners are probably really happy to hear that it does get better at some point, but you still have to grieve. You can't avoid or skip that part of the process. And it's important to to know that and own that. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll bite you. If you as therapists, we say the only way is through.
Mm-hmm.
If you try and skirt this, you'll get bit.
Absolutely.
And for a lot of women, it's one of those things where I see people get stuck in it more than effectively skirt around it.
Yeah, definitely, can see that in thinking about a couple of clients I've worked with that, it's like, no, you got to go through it. You can't just, oh, no, it doesn't matter. I'll just do this. No, you got to do both. You can do all of that, but you also still got to deal with these emotions. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. So I want to shift gears for a bit. And, the name of the podcast is Self-Aware and Effed Up. I want to know, how do you personally identify with the idea of being self-aware and effed up?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect segue of what we were just talking about in terms of avoidance and skirting around. I'm an avoider.
Okay.
And I am a really good one. Like, I have cultivated the avoidance coping strategy from a very young age. And I think that until I started to face it head on and like recognize, here's what I'm feeling, I just was languishing in the same space. And I wasn't allowing myself to get out there and get supports. So I identify with it in that if I'm not self-aware, I'm not moving forward. I'm not growing. And then I'm just languishing, which isn't fun. And, in terms of the effed up part, I think we all are. And we just have to embrace it. We have to embrace who we are, work through it, see it as quirks that then we use to our advantage. One side of the coin is maybe effed up. The other side of the coin is resilient. And depending on the day is the coin that I have facing up.
I gotcha. I'm laughing because that was a very therapist answer. But but I'm gonna give you a pass.
You can take the therapist out of that. Yeah. I mean, it's, if you're not self-aware, somebody is going to make you self-aware, or the universe is going to make you self-aware.
Gotcha.
And I don't need the brick thrown at my head. I prefer the knock that just starts to tell me something's going on versus, now I have told you this 10,000 times, Carrie, and you keep ignoring me. So now I'm throwing a brick in your face.
Gotcha. So you get it together. Like, it's probably going to take that brick for me to like, okay, you need to listen. That's just me because I'm defiant in me. So
yeah, I have one area in my life where that's happening. And it's so funny. I just said to my therapist the other day, I'm like, I know I need to make this change, and I feel like I can't make this change. And I'm real worried the universe is going to like force me to make it in a way that's going to like scare the shit out of me. So I'm working through it.
I got you. We'll keep working through it, but don't wait on the brick because you don't want the brick.
I know. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to share about, or anything else you think people should know about people who are childless not by choice, or child-free not by choice, if we're using that reframe?
Yeah. I think that you can live a life that's meaningful, purposeful, and fun if you are childless not by choice. If you love someone who's childless not by choice, they can live a life that's meaningful, purposeful, and fun. And just listen. Don't feel like you have to problem solve it. You can't solve this problem.
Yeah.
You can't solve this problem for them. Even though she's your best friend, you can't do it. So just listen. And seek out community. I think if you go onto like the social media accounts and sort of in that childless not by choice community, the overwhelming thing people will tell you is, I wish I would have sought out community way earlier.
Gotcha. So definitely community is a big part of it. I've heard you say it a couple of times as we've been talking. So definitely the community piece, like really, really important for anyone who is dealing with childlessness, not by choice. Carrie, I appreciate your time so much. Can you please tell people how to connect with you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Sonder Sisterhood, and also at The Other Path Coaching. I have websites that are the same. I also have a YouTube channel at Sonder Sisterhood. Really, my mission is to talk about tips and tricks, validation and support. So if you're feeling alone or, seeing a therapist or a coach, like budget wise, just doesn't make sense for you, I've got lots of free things to just help you get started and would love to have you join the community.
Awesome, awesome. So you guys, please make sure that you connect with Carrie. I'm not going to take a stab at your last name again, but I really appreciate your time. I really, really do appreciate your time and really your openness in talking about this topic, because I really feel like it's something that needs to be discussed a lot more. And I appreciate your mission and what you do to help women. It is so important. So thank you for your time and thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Awesome. Awesome. So you guys, please make sure that you connect with Carrie. Also make sure that you follow me, Treaty LPC, on all social media platforms under the handle Treaty LPC. Until next time, be safe, be well, and make sure that you take care of your mental health.